Tonight's shir is special in the sense that it's a continuation of a series of shirim that were given about 15 years ago in New York by our Rebbe Nachman, who had intended at the time, he spoke of giving a series of shirim going through all of Rabbi Arizal's Sforim and putting all of them onto tape. Unfortunately, he wasn't zeicher to complete this during his physical lifetime, and he passed away shortly after the time that he gave the last shir that we have recorded in Sichos Haran, which is up to paragraph Reish Nun Ches in the Sefer Sichos Haran. Tonight we're going to attempt to continue that series of shirim and to do the best we can to emulate the way that he would have presented these items, Rabbi Arizal's teachings. In the next paragraph, Reish Nun Ches, Rav Nosson writes that Rabbi Arizal reprimanded us a great deal about doing a lot of mitzvahs. He wanted us to do many mitzvahs. And Rav Nosson says it appears that Rabbi Arizal's kavana was, Rabbi Arizal's intent was, that we should do mitzvahs also. Meaning, those that are familiar with Rabbi Arizal's Sforim and the shirim that he gave to his Talmidim, you could sum up in two words basically what his emphasis was to his Talmidim. And it was basically Torah and Tefillah. Those were the items that he put the most emphasis on. In Torah, the major emphasis was on the study of Torah, learning Torah Lishma, and naturally performing all of its mitzvahs, but heavy accentuation on the study of Torah and Tefillah, all forms of Tefillah, including the saying of Shachris Mincha Marav with Kavana, including the saying of Tehillim, including the saying of all kinds of Tchinos and Bakoshos that are found in Sforim, in Sidurim. That was where the main stress was in all of Rabbi Arizal's teachings. Here, however, Rav Nosson says that one time Rabbi Arizal reprimanded us harshly about doing a lot of mitzvahs. And Rav Nosson says specifically, lekabetz nedovos v'lasok b'gemilus chasodim u'kiyotze bozer. He was referring specifically to collecting charity, raising money for tzedakah, and also to be osek in gemilus chasodim, meaning for people to be doing favors for other people in every type of form and manner that it could be done. And Rav Nosson says that Rabbi Arizal's words at that time in Yiddish, Rabbi Arizal remarked, "Epis tutir gor kein mitzvah," which in English this translates to, it seems that somehow you're not doing any mitzvahs. This is what he said to his Talmidim. Now we know in reading stories about Rabbi Arizal's Talmidim, we're talking about people that were very religious. Many of them devoted 18 hours a day, 24 hours a day to the study of Torah and to Tefillah. The question is, what exactly did Rabbi Arizal mean here when he said, "Epis tutir kein mitzvah"? Seems you're not doing any mitzvahs. And it seems that what Rabbi Arizal is referring to is something that applied to people then and also applies to people nowadays. There is a major Yetzer Hara among certain people within Yiddishkeit, certain very religious people, to focus all of their attention, or the vast majority of their attention, on 2/3 of Yiddishkeit. The 2/3 being Torah and Avodah. The study of Torah, and they could certainly support that and prove that by the statement that the Gemara makes, V'talmud Torah keneged kulam, that the study of Torah is greater than all mitzvahs, and Avodah referring nowadays specifically to Tefillah. And people can easily specifically those people that get very into the study of Torah and Tefillah to the point where they're devoting themselves b'leiv or nefesh to these items, there is a special Yetzer Hara to overlook the third major section of Yiddishkeit, of what keeps the world turning, and that being Gemilus Chasodim. People going out of their way to look after the needs of other people for a person to be yearning and searching for opportunities to be able to do somebody else a favor, to be able to give somebody else a nachas ruach. Or here specifically, Rabbi Arizal addresses one additional item, that being fundraising, raising charity, implying not where a person is collecting for himself, but rather a person is going out of his way to help support mosbos of Torah, or mosbos of Tefillah, or to help support any major legitimate Jewish cause. And Rabbi Arizal wanted to stress from his Talmidim that he didn't want this trap, he didn't want them to fall into this trap of missing out on this third major foundation of what keeps the world going. This is basically what Rabbi Arizal said in this paragraph. To this, I'd like to add a very interesting item, something that I found extremely interesting and special, that I saw years ago in one of the Pirushim on Pirkei Avos. One of the outstanding tzadikim during the time of the Baal Shem Tov is known as the Chikuney Zohar. The Chikuney Zohar was one of the great Sephardic rabbis who originally lived in Chutz Loretz and then was zeicha to make Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. And he lived in Hebron, I believe, in Eretz Yisrael itself. And he was one of the major writers for Klal Yisrael in just about every area of Torah. In Halacha, we have his Pirush, the Birkei Yosef, on Shulchan Aruch, on all these sections of Shulchan Aruch, which is extremely highly regarded by both Sfardim and Ashkenazim. He's considered a major posek. And also many additional Sforim that he wrote on Drush, on Halacha, on Kabbalah, a Pirush on the Zohar Kodesh, many Sforim that he wrote. One of the Chikuney Zohar's major accomplishments in life, after having made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, is that he was the one that was designated by the rabbis of the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael to be the Shlucha de Rabbanon, to be the one to represent them leaving Eretz Yisrael, being forced to leave Eretz Yisrael and travel in Chutz Loretz for a period of years. And his trip is actually documented in Sforim, how he traveled by donkey, not by plane, not by bus, but by ship and donkey, traveling through most of the major countries of Europe, collecting money for the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. And there's a great deal written about what interesting items happened to him on his travels to the different cities, the different receptions that he received in the different places, the different kibudim and bizyonos that he got in this process. One of the Sforim that he wrote when he was very young, the Sefer Roshei David, is quoted in his Pirush to Pirkei Avos, which is Kisei Rachamim. In the Kisei Rachamim, which is the Pirush on Pirkei Avos, he quotes this Sefer that he wrote as a young man, and he mentions a very interesting Chiddush. We know that the Torah in many places speaks about serving Hashem in three major ways. One is b'machshava, the second is b'dibur, and the third is maisa. There's a concept of serving Hashem in thought. There are mitzvahs in the Torah which relate to what a Jew is allowed to think about and what they're not allowed to think about. There are certain things which if a Jew thinks about them, that's considered an Aveira, going against Hashem. Thoughts of Avodah Zorah, Hirhure Avodah Zorah, or Hirhure Pegam Abris, those types of items. There's also a concept of thoughts of Kedusha, which in fact the next paragraph, Rabbi Nachman is going to talk about this a great deal, but we find even in Shulchan Aruch, in Halacha, this concept of thought has a place. In terms of accomplishing for Kedusha, we're going to discuss this in the next paragraph in Sichos Haran. That's one major area of serving Hashem. The second area is B'dibur, and there are many mitzvahs in the Torah, both loisaseh and aseh, that relate to dibur, what a person is allowed, what a person is mitzvah to speak about, and what a Jew is not allowed to speak about. And the third area is maaseh, action, deeds that a person does to serve Hashem. Again, in both forms, loisaseh and aseh. The Zohar Kodesh says that in the name that Hashem has given to mankind, in the word Adam, is reflected these three major areas. The Aleph stands for machshava. Aleph, which is one, which is the beginning, stands for the top, the roish, the head. the thought process. The Daled stands for Dibur, and the Mem stands for Machshava. These are the three, Maisa. The Mem stands for Maisa. These are the three major ways that a Jew serves Hashem. The Tikuney Zohar says that based on this, we have a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, where the Mishnah says that there are three items that support the world: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilus Chasodim. The Tikuney Zohar says that Avodah in this case refers to Yiras Shamayim. We know the Gemara uses the term Avodah Shebelev, Avodah that's done with the heart. And the Torah says, Dovar HaMosor Lelev Nemar Boi V'Yoreisem Elekecha, that what's in a Jew's heart is their fear of Hashem. That's something that's not necessarily visible. You could have people who on the outside are studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, but the Torah and the mitzvah is lacking in punch, in power, because there's a lack of Yira Shamayim behind it to really give it its true strength. So the Yira Shamayim, the Avodah, is something that relates to Machshava, to the heart, to the thought process. The Torah is the Avodah B'dibur. We learned just last night the Gemara in Eruvin, which says, Ki chayim heim lemoitzi'ehem bepeh. The Torah gives life to those who give forth its words, who speak its words. There are many psukim stressing Dibur of Torah. That's the Dibur, Torah. And Gemilas Chasodim is the example of Maisa, serving Hashem b'Maisa. These three items, which represent Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa, Avodah, Torah, and Gemilas Chasodim, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, these three items support the world. The Tikuney Zohar says, now we'll show you something very interesting. We know that Hashem created a Malach whose purpose is, he is the obstacle preventing a Jew from doing what he has to do to serve Hashem or to support the world. This Malach, as we basically know him, is known as the Soton. However, those that know a little bit more know that the Zohar HaKodesh tells us that there's nothing in this world that does not come in the form of both Zohar and Nekeva, male and female. Every single item in this world is either male or Zohar or Nekeva or both. And the Zohar HaKodesh stresses that just as in Kedusha there is a concept of Zohar and Nekeva, Kaviochel, when we do a mitzvah, we say that one of the main reasons for our doing a mitzvah is L'shem Yichud Kudshe Barichu Ushchintei, that the purpose of our doing the mitzvah is to unite Hashem and the Shekhinah, which represent symbolically a heavenly Zohar and Nekeva. So too, in Tumah also, when we discuss the Soton, there's also not one, but there are two symbols of the Soton. We find that one of these symbols is mentioned in the Gemara in several places, an angel by the name of Samach Mem. His full name is spelled Samach Mem and then Aleph Lamed, just as most Malachim's names end in the word Kael. This angel's name is Samach Mem, Kael, Samach Mem referring to poison, death. Because we know the Torah tells us that the Soton and the angel of death, the Malach HaMoves, are one and the same. The Tikuney Zohar says, quoting the Sifrei Kabbalah, that this angel, the Samach Mem, represents the Zohar of the Soton. There is a female counterpart also that's mentioned in Sforim, mentioned throughout the Torah, that's known as the Malach Lil, Lamed Yud, then Lamed Yud Tov. That's the full name of this Malach. And these Malachim are discussed in great detail in the Zohar HaKodesh. They're referred to in the Gemara also. The Arizal, the other Sforim, speak a great deal about them. These two make up the total package of the Soton. The Tikuney Zohar says, we know that the Torah is very particular about names. When an angel has a certain name, the name is a reflection of the mission of that angel and the strength of that angel. We know that the Gemara tells us in one place, Hashem says, Barosi Yetzer Hara, I have created a Yetzer Hara, Barosi Torah Tavlin, and I've created a neutralizing force for the Soton. There is an equal opposite force that a person could use to neutralize the Satan. What is it? The Torah. The Tikuney Zohar says, I'll show you why. I'll show you exactly how this works. Because the Satan, in his total format, Zohar and Nekeva, the Malach Samach Mem, which is Bigimatria 131, Samach Mem Aleph Lamed is Bigimatria 131, the Nekeva portion, Lil, Lamed Yud Tov, is Bigimatria 480. Together, they are Bigimatria 611, which is the exact Gematria of the word Torah. Taf Vav Reish Hey. So now we can understand where the Gemara says, Hashem says, I've created a Yetzer Hara over here, on this side. On the opposite side of the seesaw, there is the Torah. These two are equal opposite forces. If you'll make a commitment to Torah, automatically you have an equalizing force to the Satan. The Satan will not be able to have an achiza on you. Interesting. The Tikuney Zohar says, let's take this further, however, because the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos seems to say that there are two other items that are on par with Torah. One is avodah, which includes karbonos. It includes tefillah, which is in place of karbonos, and it also includes yiras shamayim, because yiras shamayim is a symbol of tefillah. Isha yiras Hashem hi tishalal, the posek says. A woman who has fear of Hashem, she davens. So that tefillah, avodah, is an example of yiras Hashem. The Tikuney Zohar says, therefore, avodah is put on par with Torah. We can easily see this because the word yiras, fear of Hashem, the word yiras is again Tov Reish Yud Aleph, 611 exactly. So we see that the second item, avodah, tefillah, has equal strength to Torah. This is another item that's an equal neutralizing force to the Satan. Now we come to the third item that the Mishnah mentions, which is serving Hashem b'maaseh, with actions, which the Mishnah refers to as gemilus chasodim. The Tikuney Zohar says, if you take your calculator, you'll see that the words gemilus chasodim are exactly Bigimatria 611. So that here we see that these three items that the Mishnah is presenting, a Jew is not permitted to assume that any one of them has any greater koyach than the other. Number one. And number two, therefore, a Jew is not supposed to give any one any preference over the other. The fact that a Jew is totally committed to Torah and to tefillah does not give that person permission to overlook this third item, serving Hashem b'maaseh, which the Mishnah puts all mitzvahs maasiyos under the heading of gemilus chasodim, specifically looking to do favors, to provide assistance for other people, one example of which is raising money for charity. So that here we see how all three of these items are of great significance. All three of them represent koichos that a person could use to wipe out the Satan completely, and this is why we stress so much that a person who wants to be religious has to make sure that all three of these items are constantly involved in all three of these items. This is where Rabbeinu Zal's teichochet his Talmidim was, that he wanted to see more mitzvahs maasiyos from them. It's not enough for a ben Torah to be sitting in a yeshiva learning and davening only. That's not an option. Otherwise, he's cutting away 1/3 of the definition of Yiddishkeit. This last third, this final third, which represents Maisa, which is in a sense the Gemar, the conclusion, the Chasima, that's totally in this concept of mitzvahs maasiyos. The next paragraph Reish Nun Tes, 259. Rav Nosson writes that one time Rabbeinu Zal said that thirst is a very great desire, seeming to imply many people are aware of the problem of taivas achila, the desire for food, something that has people preoccupied. Certain people 24 hours a day, certain people 25 hours a day. And a concept of a person feeling a strong desire for achila, And we find that the Meforshim stress that within Achila, there are two parts, Achila and Shtia, eating and drinking, and the term Taiva, desire, is more closely associated with Shtia. When a person is thirsty, the intense feelings of desire that they have for liquid are stronger than a person's feelings when they're hungry are for food. This is an item that's mentioned in the Meforshim. Rabbeinu Zal discussed this point, the fact that simoin, thirst, is a very great taiva, and Rav Nosson Zal writes that I understood from Rabbeinu Zal's words that he wanted to stress the importance of thirsting for Hashem, of a person yearning and feeling an intense desire that's included in this word thirst, to be thirsting for Hashem. And Rabbeinu Zal was stressing that this is one of the highest items in religion. Just as a person who's extremely thirsty, when that person finally gets to water, the person experiences a pleasure, an unbelievable pleasure from drinking this water based on the extreme thirst that they were experiencing. So we see therefore that there is this tainug godol, an extraordinary pleasure from satisfying one's thirst. So too Rabbeinu Zal said regarding a person who's zeicha to arouse inside of themselves a thirst for coming close to Hashem. And Rabbeinu Zal said that when we talk about the concept of pleasure in Olam Haba, the type of pleasure that a Jew is going to experience in Olam Haba, in the world to come, that's where the Jews are going to be zeicha to achieve the highest level of thirsting for Hashem, of this rotzain for Hashem, that's known in the Zohar HaKadosh as the term Raiva Derivin, or in Hebrew, Rotzain Sheberetzainais, desire of desires. This is one of the descriptions that's given of the peak of Kedusha that a Jew will be zeicha to experience in Olam Haba. And that's actually the term that's used to refer to the histalkus of Moshe Rabbeinu. When the Zohar HaKadosh discusses the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, he left this world, the Zohar HaKadosh uses the terminology that he left this world, and the place that he entered into was called Raiva Derivin, Rotzain Sheberetzainais, which means the most intense level of desire, of thirst to come close to Hashem. Rabbeinu Zal makes mention of the fact that in the Zohar HaKadosh it discusses a concept of 400 worlds of kisufin, 400 worlds of yearning that tzadikim will be zeicha to inherit in Olam Haba. And the Zohar HaKadosh bases this where the Torah discusses the passing away of Sarah Imenu, who represented one of the greatest tzidkonios of all time. And the Torah tells us that when Avraham Avinu bought the plot in which she was buried in, the Moras HaMachpelah, he bought it for 400 shekel kesef, 400 shkolim of silver. The Zohar HaKadosh says kesef is miloshen kisufa. Kisufin, lichsoif in Hebrew, also means to yearn, to desire. And the Zohar HaKadosh says this is one of the bases in the Torah Shebechsav for this concept of these 400 worlds of kisufin, of yearning, that tzadikim are zeicha to when they pass away. They enter into this madrega called 400 shekel kesef. And Rabbeinu Zal says it's then when a person passes away, that's when the person is zeicha to have the purest type of thirst and yearning for Hashem, and that this represents the greatest pleasure of Olam Haba, when a person is zeicha to achieve the purest degree of thirsting and yearning to come close to Hashem. Now this item, this term rotzain, desire, or kisufin, yearning, or hishtoikikus and giaguin, these are all terms that are used very often in Rabbeinu Zal and Rav Nosson Zal's Sforim, and in general in Sifrei Chassidus and in Sifrei Kabbalah. There's a great deal of discussion about these items. We're going to mention a few of the interesting items that are mentioned in Rabbeinu Zal's Sforim and Rav Nosson Zal's Sforim regarding this item of rotzain, desire, how great a place this holds within Yiddishkeit. A person's wanting to do a mitzvah, or a person's wanting to come close to Hashem, that alone. Rabbi Arizal makes a statement in another place, where Rabbi Arizal says that the Iker Hishavus HaNefesh, the main existence of a Jewish soul, and the main way of bringing a Nefesh Dikdusha into existence, is through Ratzon, through desire. Every single time that a Jew feels a desire for a Dover Toiv, a Jew thinks, I want to study Torah, I want to get up early for davening, I want to help somebody. Every time a person has a Ratzon Toiv, in a sense, that creates a Nefesh Toiv. That creates an actual Nefesh. Rabbi Nachman says, proof to this is that we find that the word Nefesh in Hebrew actually means Ratzon. We find there's a posek when Avraham Avinu, in the same topic, when Avraham Avinu was going to bury his wife Sarah, one of the statements that he made to the Bnei Ches was where he said, Im yesh es nafshechem likber es meisi, if you want to allow me to bury my wife, then introduce me to Ephraim ben Soichar. He used the word Im yesh es nafshechem, and the Gemara or Rashi HaKodesh points out that nafshechem there means ritzonchem, your ratzon, if you want. So that we see that these two words are actually used interchangeably. Rabbi Nachman says that there are times when we see a person who's been a Rasha his whole life, and suddenly one day he wakes up and he does Teshuva. The question is, where does he get the fire? Where does he get the strength and the power to be able to do Teshuva? Rabbi Nachman says quite often that nefesh of Kedusha that was injected into him was created through Ritzonos Tovos of other Jews. Jews who are constantly thinking of wanting to do mitzvahs. There are many times that a person wants to do a mitzvah and they don't actually get to do it. What happens with that desire? Does that go lost? The answer is chas v'sholem. One of the most famous statements in the Zohar HaKodesh that's quoted in Sforim throughout is the statement, Leis re'usa tavo de'is avid. There's no such thing as a rotzon toiv on the part of a Jew that goes lost completely. That never happens. So the question is, what happens if I have a good desire to do a mitzvah and I end up not doing the mitzvah? Where does that rotzon toiv go? Rabbi Nachman says quite often those Ritzonos Tovos are packaged, and when enough of them are added up together, they form an actual nefesh. This nefesh, at the right time, enters into a Rasha and is machziroi lemutov. When a Rasha suddenly feels a hisoirus, he doesn't know from where it came from. One day he wakes up in the morning and it's like a brick hit him in the head, and he suddenly decides he wants to be good. That came from nowhere. The answer is chas v'sholem. That came from these Ritzonos Tovos that Jews have, which quite often do not complete themselves in Meiser, and yet these Ritzonos are bound together until they form a strong enough unit. These Ritzonos, these Nefashos, enter together into a Rasha, they're nisaber in him, and there they bring him this his oirus that he needs to be chayzer b'tshuva. On the opposite end of the pendulum, Rabbi Nachman says, unfortunately, the same thing holds true. That a Jew has to be careful to watch themselves from even wanting to do something bad, wanting to do something wrong, or having a desire for something that doesn't belong to you. Why? Because Rabbi Nachman says we find cases also of people that are tzadikim for a certain period of time, and one day suddenly we find this tzadik going south, going off the right path and turning sour and spoiling. And Rabbi Nachman says, unfortunately, there are times where what causes that is these ritzonos ro'os. When Jews allow themselves to have a desire for something bad, for something wrong, these ritzonos, Rachmana litzlan, can also form nefashos, a nefesh of tumah, and these nefashos of tumah can actually harm either the person himself or other Jews, chas v'sholem. Even tzadikim at times could be harmed by these ritzonos rois. So that in effect we find that it's extremely important for a person to train themselves to constantly be yearning for good things, constantly, even if he can't do a mitzvah, even if he can't learn that moment, even if he can't daven, to want to learn, to want to daven, to want to help somebody. I wish I had the money to solve this person's problem. That rotzain alone is a tremendous accomplishment of Kedusha. Rabbi Arizal stresses, however, that this rotzain alone creates a nefesh bekoyach. It creates a nefesh in theory. What makes this nefesh become tangible and ma'asi is when a person speaks the ritzonos. When a person takes it a step further, and besides saying in my mind or in my heart, I want to do good, if a Jew is zeicha to spend time during the day saying to Hashem, expressing verbally these ritzonos of Kedusha, saying to Hashem, I wish I could learn better than I'm learning now, or more. I wish I could give more money to tzedakah. Expressing these ritzonos verbally, that's what takes these nefoshos from koyach to poyal, from theory into maaseh. It makes these nefoshos actually become active in a sense of accomplishing. So that here it becomes very important to follow through the rotzain with dibur, with speech. And this is the reason, one of the reasons why Rabbi Arizal stressed so much a Jew setting aside time during the day to speak with Hashem, to express these ritzonos tovos, or to say to Hashem, I don't want to do the wrong thing. Even if you see me doing the wrong thing, Hashem, don't think it's because that's what I want. I really don't want to do the wrong thing. It's only the satan, the su'er shabisa, that's twisting my arm, that's forcing me to do it. And a person simply saying this alone is considered a major accomplishment of expressing this rotzain tov. Rav Nosson writes in Likutei Halachos that to show how far this goes, a person should know that with ritzonos tovos alone, a person can actually be mamlich Hashem. The fact that a Jew says, I want to do something to serve Hashem, that alone represents the act of putting a crown, kaviochel, on Hashem's head. And Rav Nosson says we see a remez to this in the Kaddish, where one of the sentences that we say in the Kaddish, we say, Bi'olma divero chirusei, in the world that Hashem has created, kiruv, which means kefi ritzainai, according to His ratzain, v'yamlich malchusei, and may His kingdom be strengthened, be heightened. And Rav Nosson brings a connection between this kiruv, v'yamlich malchusei, that the more a person is zoche to be nichlal in the ratzain of Hashem, the more a person is zoche to want what Hashem wants, the more that person is actually mamlich Hashem. We find that one of the outstanding ceremonies that a Jew performs during the year is on the night of Pesach. We have the Seder. Quite often, even those Jews that are the least religious, at least this minimal degree of religion they keep, that they have a Seder on Pesach night. The Meforshim speak a great deal about the 13 items that a Jew is required to do during the Seder. Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, and regarding the great lights, heavenly lights that are turned on by a Jew being Mekayim, these items within the sequence. However, we find that the 14th item, the climax of the entire Seder, is called Nirtza. What is Nirtza? What do we do for Nirtza? The answer is we do nothing. What do we say for Nirtza? The answer is we just about say nothing in a sense. We say the Hallel, that represents to a degree the Nirtza, but the main emphasis of the word Nirtza is the fact that a person is supposed to stop to think that their avoda, that their mitzvahs that they did were nisratze, that Hashem accepted it, meaning that they were oile lerotzoim, that these actions, this whole ceremony that I did, this whole avoda that I did tonight, was accepted willingly by Hashem, lerotzoim. Just as all the karbonos in the Beis Hamikdash that were brought, we find that it's mentioned many times in the Chumash that the purpose of these karbonos were lerotzoim lifnei Hashem. So that the name that's given to the highest level of Kedusha, the climax, is called Nirtza, or Rotzain. The Arizal brings that Moshe Rabbeinu, who represented the greatest tzadik that ever lived, when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, nistalik, when he rose up, we know that when a tzaddik passes away, he achieves a higher level than he was on during his lifetime. We mentioned recently that the Gemara says about Moshe Rabbeinu, V'techasrehu ma'at me'elikim, that during his lifetime, he was a little bit lower than Hashem. And the Gemara translates this to mean that Kaviochel, when we talk about Hashem, when we talk about perfection, perfection is represented by the 50 levels of Bina, 50 levels of wisdom. Moshe Rabbeinu, during his physical lifetime, achieved 49 of these. He was zeichet to 49 of the 50 levels of Bina. The Meforshim bring, however, that when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, and he was stripped of his body, all that remained was his neshama. In the word neshama, the Arizal says, there is a remez to Moshe Nun, that in the form of the neshama, the soul, Moshe Rabbeinu achieved the 50th level. And this is why the Torah tells us that the place where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried was called Har Nevoi, the mountain of Nevoi. The Arizal says Nevoi is two words, Nun, Boi. The 50th level was achieved on it. When Moshe Rabbeinu was nistalik, he went from 49 to 50. Now the question is, what's the name of that 50th level that Moshe Rabbeinu rose up to? The Zohar HaKadosh says the name of that level is Rotzoin. Proof is that Moshe, Mem Shin Hei, is Bigimatria 345. Rotzoin, Reish Tzadik Vov Nun, is Bigimatria 346. It's Moshe plus 1. When Moshe goes up, it becomes Ratzoin. That's the level into which Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. That's the name of that level. It's called Ratzoin. So great, so holy is this madrega of good desire, having a desire, a cheshek for toiv. Rav Nosson also makes mention of the fact that as far as a Jew saying that they did a mitzvah, it's very difficult for a person to really accept credit for doing. One of the reasons being because the Gemara says in Kiddushin, V'chol yoim v'yoim yitzroi shel adam eskaber olav, that each and every single day the Yetzer Hara becomes stronger and stronger against the person, blocking the person from doing mitzvahs, from doing ma'asim tovim. And the Gemara says, V'ilmole HaKadosh Baruch Hu Oizroi, and were it not for Hashem helping us, Haya Noifel Biyodoi, we would certainly fall victim to the Satan. We would certainly do Averos. We would certainly be prevented from doing mitzvahs. So we see that the Gemara seems to be giving major credit to Hashem, not to us. The Gemara says clearly, were it not for Hashem's help, you could never do the mitzvah. The Satan would easily defeat you in this battle. So that in a sense, Rav Nosson says, for a person to feel that they're taking credit for doing a mitzvah, extremely difficult. Where is the credit? Where is the nachas that Hashem gets from a Jew? The ikar nachas that Hashem gets from a Jew is from the Ritzonos. When the Jew wants to do a mitzvah, when a Jew is yearning to do a mitzvah, that part comes from within the person themselves. That's what you can really give to Hashem. And that's the ikar nachas, the main satisfaction that Hashem gets from a Jew, is when a Jew is constantly occupied and preoccupied with this thought, I want to please Hashem. From the minute a person wakes up in the morning, during all their waking hours, constantly thinking, I wish I could serve Hashem. I wish I could please Hashem. I wish I could avoid doing what's going to bring displeasure to Hashem. That's where the nachas comes in, the main nachas comes in. It's interesting to note, there's a medrash that says that if a Jew ever tries to come to Hashem and to say, I did a mitzvah, Hashem could easily laugh that person off. You're coming to show off you gave me something, Hashem says? I'll show you what I have to say for you. What did you give me? You gave me a mezuzah? I gave you a house. You gave me a little mezuzah that cost $30? I gave you a house that cost $100,000. What did you give me? Tzitzis? I gave you clothing. I gave you a whole suit of clothing. Socks, shoes, pants, shirt, undershirt, hat, tie, suit, the whole bit. And the Medrash goes on to list a whole series of items where Hashem says, Mi hekdimani va'ashalim loi. Let somebody come and show me that they've done something for me, and I'll pay. I'll pay. And the Medrash says that Hashem could chas v'shalom easily laugh off our mitzvahs by saying that just about, you gave meiser, you gave $10 to tzedakah, I gave you 90. You kept 90 for yourself. So that again, just about every mitzvah, to a great degree, was shown in the mitzvah itself that we're really on the receiving end. We're not really doing the giving, we're doing the taking. Elamai, the Roikeach says, therefore, the Iker Madrega of Tzadik, the Iker case where a person could feel that he's doing something for Hashem, is by the Rotzain, the desire, the Cheshek for the mitzvah. And he brings a proof for this from the first posek in Pashas Noach. The posek begins, Eile toildois Noach, Noach ish tzadik. These are the children of Noach, and the posek doesn't make any mention of his children at all. It doesn't say a word about his children. It says, Noach ish tzadik. Noach was a tzadik. So the Gemara asks, where's his children? So the Gemara says, toildoisein shel tzadikim, hey mitzvahs u'maisim tovim. The children, the main children and produce of a tzadik is his tzidkus, his good deeds, his mitzvahs and maisim tovim. So the Roikeach says, but we just said that the mitzvahs aren't really much, because even in the mitzvahs, that's not your toildos, that's Hashem's toildos. So the Roikeach says, take a look at the words Noach ish tzadik. Take a look at the conclusion. The bottom line is always at the end. Take a look at the end, the last letter of Noach ish tzadik, ches shin kuv, cheshek. You want to know what the toildos of Noach is? You want to know what the mitzvah of a tzaddik is? It's not the mitzvah itself that has so much chashivas by Hashem, as much as the cheshek for doing the mitzvah. What Hashem gets the greatest nachas out of is when Hashem sees that a person really wants. When a person runs to shul, the going to shul is special. The running to shul, that's 10 times as special. When a person shows an a chiba for a mitzvah, a person kisses the tefillin before putting them on. Is kissing tefillin a mitzvah? No. It's the cheshek for the mitzvah. A person stands up for the Torah comes in, a Talmud Chacham comes in, is standing up for the Torah, is that learning Torah? No, but it's showing the cheshek, the rotzain, the ahava that the person has for the mitzvah. And this is an item that Rabbi Arizal stresses in this paragraph, Reish Nun Tes, to a very great deal, and we're going to have more on this in the next paragraph, in paragraph Reish Samach, 260. Halavai, we should be zeicher to realize how significant a role this item plays in Yiddishkeit, so that even when a person is feeling down over how little they've done, how little they've accomplished, a person knows that this item is always available to them. This is something that could never be taken away from a Jew if they don't give up. If a person gives up, chas v'shalom, they give up hope, that's when even the Rotzain falls apart. But no matter what level a person is on, as long as the person is still yearning, I wish I could go to shul, I wish I could be learning, I wish I could be giving more, all of these Ritzonos, these are something that are considered very precious to Hashem, especially when it's sincere. We're talking about a case where a person really means it. Halavai, we should be zeicher to the type of Rotzain that Rabbi Nazal and Rav Nosson were discussing here, and the zechus of these Ritzonos Tovos. We should be zeicher to get to see in our time the culmination of what's going to be built out of these Ritzonos, which is the coming of Moshiach, the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, Meher V'Yameinu, Amen V'Yamein. in our time, the culmination of what's going to be built out of these Ritzonos, which is the coming of Moshiach, the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, Meher V'Yameinu, Amen V'Amen. Amen. Tonight's shir, we're continuing where we left off in Sichos Haran. We're up to paragraph Reish Samach 260. In the previous paragraph, the last item that we had, Rabbi Arizal spoke about the topic of simoin, thirst, and specifically in terms of thirsting for Hashem, a person having very intense yearning and desire to come close to Hashem. This paragraph that we're up to now, Reish Samach, continues a little bit on that subject. Rav Nosson writes that Rabbi Arizal spoke with me and he made a very big deal, a very major issue about a person's yearning and desire for doing a mitzvah or doing any davar shebikdusha, any good deed, any holy item, even when the person doesn't succeed in carrying it out. There are a lot of times that people, human beings, have an attitude towards each other that if a person says, I tried to do a certain item for you, and the other person's answer is a penny for your efforts. You tried, but you didn't do it, but I didn't get it. So what does it help me that you tried? No matter how hard you want to say you tried. We see that the Torah says that when it comes to Hashem, who is perfect, and who is the epitome, the only symbol of perfection that exists, and yet Hashem with His perfection says that when a person puts in a sincere effort to try to do something, or even if a person simply wants very much to do good, there's a lot of credit that's given just for that. And Rav Nosson says that Rabbi Arizal pointed out a proof to this from a law in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim, chapter 62, discusses, in a discussion about the laws of Kriya Shema, the Shulchan Aruch says that there are certain cases where a person could find themselves in a place where they're not permitted to recite a posek in the Torah. Now the question is, if a person finds themselves, Rahman al-Itzlan, in cases where Jews were in prison,